The following presentation is made possible thanks to generous contributions made by the following: the Sackler family, Smith & Wesson, the U.S. Department of Corn, Palantir, the Bill and Anastasia Gates Foundation, the David Duke Institute, the Privatization of the Arts Fund, and members like you.
These are the times that try men's souls. But he who dares not offend dare not be honest. My fellow Americans, ask not if we hold these truths to be self-evident. Ask what you can do to avoid taxation. For the only thing we have to fear is that everybody's gone surfing. Surfing USA. Oh, say can you see that I have a dream of a new nation, under God, easily divisible, with liberty and justice for all. Abraham Washington, 1776.
"250 years ago, a group of illiterate men would gather in these hallowed halls to scribble down what historians can now only assume were words. Words that would one day be assigned meaning. Words and pictures. Pictures mostly. That would serve as the founding principles for a grand new experiment that would forever change the course of human history. An experiment that would produce a monstrosity so powerful, it would soon be known to the whole world by just one name." More than 100 years after the Pilgrims boarded the Mayflower and embarked on their search for the religious freedom to praise Allah, American colonists began a search for freedom of their own. Tensions had begun to rise between the colonies and the British after a series of repressive parliamentary statutes: the Currency Act, the Stamp Act, and most of all, the Biscuit Act.
The Biscuit Act ordered the American colonists to fall in line with the British and begin referring to all cookies as biscuits.
The colonists were infuriated.
These acts are an egregious display of tyrannical rule. You want us to say chocolate chip biscuit? That is not what biscuits are. Biscuits are fluffy bread you can eat for breakfast and put gravy on. I would sooner die the shameful, violent death of a coward than put gravy on a snickerdoodle. Samuel Adams.
Americans hate calling things a different name than what they want to call them, and being forced to do so sparked outrage throughout the colonies. The flame was lit.
Early acts of insurgency against the British were underway, but not all would be successful.
The Boston Water Party was an attempt to upset the British rulers.
On November 14th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty decided that, as an act of protest, they wanted to dump something in the Boston harbor. But all they had was water.
They snuck onto British ships and dumped barrels of their own water into the harbor, which was, of course, already full of water.
Plus, it was their harbor, and the British cargo was all right there. They just hadn't put two and two together yet.
Late in the evening, my guard company was alerted to a commotion in the harbor. We rushed over, only to find drunken colonists dumping barrels of water over the bow. They appeared to be their own barrels that they brought from home. I suppose it was intended as some display of defiance. We just let them go until they tired themselves out. Lieutenant James Kensington.
Not their best effort.
Realizing the idiocy of their pathetic descent, efforts were made to form a more unified front. In 1774, the First Continental Congress united the colonies for what they believed would be an oncoming war. All colonies were present but one.
Georgia had originally been established as a nudist colony, founded on the principles of freedom, comfort, and letting it all hang out.
These Georgians seem to feel no shame about their body. Naked as their mother birthed them, they appear content to let their various genitalia sag freely. It's weird. Thomas Jefferson.
Delegates from South Carolina would demand assurances Georgia would at least bring towels if they were to sit on the furniture. Unity was fleeting. It would take a man of historic magnitude to bring all the colonies together once and for all.
When I was selected as the commander of the Continental Army, many were skeptical of Georgia's inclusion. They make me uncomfortable. They're always trying to give people massages. But as the leader I was, I said, the revolution needs every man, bare-assed as he may be. Even the sound of scrotum slapping against thigh can serve as the drumbeat of freedom.
Georgia's freaky-ass colonists would join the fight. And on April 19, 1775, just as it was scheduled in the calendar, the War for Independence officially began. As British troops advanced from Boston, one Paul Revere began his famous midnight ride across Massachusetts, bravely whipping his horse harder than anyone had ever whipped a horse before.
Revere knew if the Redcoats were able to descend on the colonists, they would confiscate all their weapons and the revolution would be over before it started. So he really beat the living hell out of that horse.
The British are coming! The British are coming! Come on, you son of a bitch!
Whipping a horse was common at the time, but this was something else.
A man rode in late at night, absolutely wailing on his horse. I mean, just going to town. When asked what he was doing, the man gave a couple more whacks to his horse and said, I forget, something about the British. And he continued abusing his horse as he rode on. Abigail Winthrop.
By the time Revere reached Lincoln, he was dragging his 1,000-pound horse's dead carcass, continuing to kick and spit on it until he was eventually captured by the British.
It was the bravest and most patriotic display of animal cruelty in the history of the United States.
In the Revolution's early days, American colonists sought a swift end to the conflict. Hundreds of Continental soldiers, driven purely by syphilis, would attempt to swim across the Atlantic Ocean and assassinate King George III with their bare hands. Most drowned shortly into their journey, and the soldiers who did make it were immediately shot in the head by the British, who could see them coming from miles away.
We lost a lot of good men due to syphilitic psychosis. Our army was crippled. We likely would have lost the war if it weren't for the founding fighters.
With their mild-mannered revolutionary alter egos, the founding fighters descended from planet Liberton with a charge to save the 13 colonies from the tyranny of the evil British Empire.
The founding fighters were the greatest heroes in the universe.
You had Jefferson Man, the J, Mad Madison,
The genius, Dr. Ben Lectro.
And of course, their leader, General George.
From taking down the gigantic Mecha Brit at Bunker Hill
To stopping the shape-shifting Benedict Arnold, these were epic clashes of good and evil.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
By 1783, the founding fighters banished King George and the British soldiers to the Shadow Dimension.
King George was all like,
Pow! And so the founding fighters used their justice cubes, and they were all like, it was sick.
The British had no choice but to surrender, and the American Revolution was finally over. 4 years later, after just one free associative brainstorming session, the Constitution was written. America had won its independence. But it would be more than 85 years before the country could once again satiate its ravenous thirst for bloodlust. By 1860, disagreements begin to rise over what was universally considered to be one of the biggest perks of living in America: slavery.
Slavery is still very much beloved in 1860, but frustrations start to mount in the North as 3/5 proves to be far too confusing of a fraction.
Why should the blacks who are property in the South be counted as such a nefarious fraction, when in fact, rounding down to 1/2 would be far easier a number to add up in one's head? Gouverneur Morris.
Despite having advanced degrees in slave mathematics, the Southern delegates' way of life would too be threatened in 1860, when in a freak act of democracy, Abraham Lincoln is elected president.
The South hates several things about Lincoln.
They hate that he's short, barely 4'5". They hate that he hasn't been assassinated yet. But what they hate most is the threat he poses to the purity of college football.
Lincoln's plan for conference expansion and realignment proves a step too far in the eyes of secessionists.
The North wishes to add teams to the Big Ten as far west as Washington, Oregon, even UCLA. And what in return for the South? Arizona to the Big 12? They're not even a football school. These conferences cannot be seen as equal, and I fear it only a matter of time before they come for our superior conference, the SEC. Alexander H. Stevens.
On December 20th, South Carolina secedes, but in the words of Abraham Lincoln, an NCAA divided against itself cannot stand. What would result was a bloody 5-year war that would involve over 2.5 million soldiers, much to the delight of many Native Americans, who reveled cheering on as they watched countless white men slaughter each other.
This war is fucking awesome. Stanhope Oati, second principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. Oh, damn. I think those two guys were related. That's fucked up. Guas Gui. Jesus Christ. These white boys are savages. Taoyate. Tuta. Wapakute.
But it wasn't all fun and games. The so-called Civil War was anything but, pitting man against man, brother against brother, honky against honky. A week before the Battle of Bull Run, a member of the Rhode Island Volunteers named William Davis wrote to his wife from Smithfield.
July 14th, 1861. My darling Deborah, I write to you from the front lines of battle. But while the war may be lonely, my heart is full. For I have met the most incredible man. His name is Clarence. Yours, William.
1 week later, Deborah writes back.
Hello, my darling. I miss you deeply. Every night I lie awake in fear you will be killed. Forever yours, Deborah. P.S. Who's Clarence?
July 21st, 1861. My darling Deborah. Why, Clarence is my sergeant. You would love him. He has broad, strong shoulders like an ox, yet hair as soft as goose down. The women here fawn over him, yet he shows no interest. And man, can he play the fife. Still yours, William.
That's nice, darling. The children, however, are growing restless. We expected you home 2 weeks ago.
August 15th, 1861. Sorry, Deborah. Still super busy at war. Clarence has improved my bayonet work tenfold, sliding the solid shaft in and out, to ensure the task is satisfied. I've sent a photograph. Doesn't he have the best sense of style? Woman-like, yet still very much a man, with a mouth as soft and warm as yours. Best, William.
Okay.
Deborah, In my own way, I must thank you, for had you not encouraged me to enlist, I would have never met Clarence, who has fulfilled me in ways I never dreamed possible. And although I no longer harbor any romantic passion for you, I hope we can remain cordial. Perhaps the three of us could all hang out and get a drink sometime. William. August 18th, 1861. My darling Deborah, Clarence has been killed by the Confederacy. His beautiful head crushed by cannon fire. War is hell. About my earlier correspondence, maybe we just forget about all the things I said? I think I'll return home now. Yours again, William.
On August 21st, William Davis died of cholera contracted from a battalion-wide orgy. 1 in 6 soldiers would die this way. On April 9, 1865, the Confederacy surrenders, paving the way for Congress to pass the 13th Amendment, which would officially outlaw slavery, but still make plantation weddings okay. The Civil War had ended. Racism was over. America would enter a period of peace and tranquility that lasted over 100 years. Nothing happened. Until
the 80s were quite a time.
What you have to understand is, in the 1980s, the documentary was king. The decline of Western civilization.
Thin Blue Line.
Koyaanisqatsi, we were absolutely eating.
The nation demanded nonfiction cinema like it never had before. And the unabashed king of the form was none other than Ken Burns.
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns.
Ken was the man. We first met when he brought me on to do reenactments on his first dock, Brooklyn Bridge. He told me, "You and I are going to the top, man. We're gonna burn this fucking city to the ground."
No one was slow panning like Ken Burns. No one was soft lighting photos like Ken Burns.
This motherfucker was telling execs to their faces that he wanted actors to read old letters out loud. He didn't do that at PBS.
He did a doc on Thomas Hart Benton. Everyone was asking,
who the fuck is Thomas Hart Benton? By the end,
you knew who the fuck Thomas Hart Benton was.
Burns was unequivocally the fucking king of documentaries, man. And he knew it.
Then came Civil War.
Civil War took everything to another level.
I was in 2 episodes of CW, I think.
Oh yeah, I was in CW. Did a whole bit on chattel slavery. Never got so much tail in my life.
One minute you're eating sushi off Robert E. Lee. The next you're doing bumps off muskets. It was crazy. But that was Ken. He pushed it, man. He pushed things.
Did he ever push things too far?
Yeah, he did.
Burns was producing documentaries at an unsustainable pace.
We were like, Ken, man, you gotta slow down. But he just kept talking about doing jazz.
He did jazz, and that was huge, but he got obsessed.
He did a documentary on the trumpet. He did a documentary on the saxophone. He did a whole 10-parter on scatting.
He had me doing crowd noises for baseball. Take after take. He just wanted it louder. Louder! And I started to say, "Ken, my voice is killing me, man." And he got this look on his face. He grabbed me by my hair and spit right down my throat. And he said, "Is that better?" I need a second.
After a series of flops, the pressure on Burns was taking its toll.
He says he doesn't even remember making Lewis and Clark, which, frankly, good for him. It was terrible.
Nobody gives a shit about Lewis fucking Clark.
The self-proclaimed jock of docks was out of ideas.
He called me one day and asked me to record it.
Ken, where are you? We gotta do another doc, man. We're gonna do another one. History. What's in history? What else is in history?
You want another topic from history?
Yeah. American history. Civil War II.
That could be interesting. Do you have more stuff about the Civil War?
No! Like World War II. Civil War II.
There was just one Civil War, Ken.
Play nice with me.
Ken?
We'll make our own war. A new war.
Ken, what's going on? Ken, are you all right?
Ken Burns needs a new war!
That was the last time we ever heard from him.
When was this?
September 10th, 2001.
The tragic downfall of Ken Burns would be just one in a long list of prophecies our founding fathers would attempt to warn against.
The architects of the Constitution, in their writings, all predicted the problems that would one day plague America and tried their best to protect against them, perhaps most notably in Washington's 1796 farewell address.
To the efficacy and permanency of this union, I am supported in my unwavering conviction that under no circumstance shall the highest office of the presidency ever be held by he who is named Jeb. They really did think of everything.
And today, America remains a spitting image of those who birthed it. A dozen or so aging white men who, rather than pay their fair share, would sooner send their poorer neighbors to die on their behalf. But just as our forefathers foresought, our history too must serve as a warning.
In his 1775 speech at the Second Virginia Convention, Patrick Henry says, "I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future, but by the past."
And those who fail to remember the sins of our past will be doomed to repeat it, over and over and over again.
Retina detected. Retina scan complete. Authorization denied. Initializing federally approved version of events.
Die on their behalf.
In his 1775 speech at the Second Virginia Convention, Patrick Henry says, "I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided. Move fast. Break things. Let's fucking go."
Let's fucking go. Known today simply as the greatest country on earth, these United States don't have a history because we don't need one. The past is whatever the hell we say it is, and the flames kindled on July 4th, 1776 have already been extinguished by the blaze that is our glorious future. A future that serves as a guiding light for all nations who might one day hope to achieve the same peace and prosperity as we do, from sea to shining sea. So say goodbye to yesterday and hello to America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, now and forever.